Parents don't let their kids suffer anymore.
Yeah.
Not cause it, but they're like, hey man, you got to figure this out yourself,
Yeah.
And so I think I know we're not talking about parenting necessarily, but like we've got to let our kids learn how to suffer well. One of my favorite quotes, Carl Jung, he says, all neurosis is a replacement for legitimate suffering. All neurosis is a replacement for legitimate suffering. And a lot of addiction stuff I see, people who just can't suffer.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't have any frustration tolerance. They don't have any ability to work through pain, and so they medicate.
This is the Turn Your Life Around podcast, and I'm the 180 lady. I've been helping people turn their lives around since 2007 as the founder and CEO of a large mental health company. The purpose of this podcast is to have meaningful conversations with old friends and new friends, everyday people just like you and me, about how they turn their lives around. We'll discuss all things mental health, fitness, finances, relationships, parenting, spirituality, you name it. My hope is that you can take something away that will encourage you today. I'm your host, Sarah Coates. Are you ready to turn your life around? Hello, welcome to today's episode, our podcast, Turn Your Life Around podcast. Really excited to introduce our guest, John Eklund. John is an ordained minister and a licensed clinical social worker. Most importantly these days, he is the founder of Recovery Alive, which I'm going to let him tell you all about because it's a really great, exciting program that he's founded and established and grown expansively over the past couple of years. So welcome to the podcast, John.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, most importantly, I'm a dad of 4 daughters. We were just talking about that.
We were just talking about that.
Crazy. Yeah.
Well, that is, yes. You're
challenging.
Right. That is your most important role.
Yeah, I just took my youngest to a college visit, and so we're going to be empty nesters, and that is terrifying.
And one of yours recently got married too, right?
I've got 2 married.
Yeah.
I've got 1 in law school. I've got a social worker, right? She just got her master's in social work. And so 3 in college, 2 married. So I need a raise. Sarah. Come on, man. It's a lot. Yeah. And you got 2.
I have 2 teenage daughters. And so before we talk about Recovery Alive and all things recovery and all the great work you're doing there, give us some pieces of advice. Being a dad, speak to the dads on the podcast. What is your greatest piece of advice for teen dads?
Just hide away. No, I would say just love your daughters. And I know that's super vague, but like lots of affection, lots of physical affection.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of work that you and I do when you have a young lady who's struggling with a dad who doesn't give affection. It's devastating. Mm-hmm. So just love your kids, give them this is boys and girls, give them tons of support. And set good boundaries. Mm-hmm. Boundaries are, I know you talk about boundaries.
I love boundaries, yeah.
But I think like being present, I think one of the things that I remember Daisy, she's 25 now, she's in law school. But I remember when she had her first breakup. And it was like, as a dad, it's like, I want to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing about this, my wife's telling me she's just devastated. And I remember on my way home, I stopped by Walmart and I wanted to do something, buy her something. I just had something in mind, like I got to fix this somehow. Right. And I went to the toy section and she's like 15, 16. And I went and got her a teddy bear, like a big teddy bear. And I just brought it home and I didn't say anything to her. I just grabbed the teddy bear and I just held it out to her as soon as I saw her, and she just started sobbing, and she grabbed the teddy bear and just wrapped herself around it. And I kind of cried with her. I know, it sounds really sappy, but like, just, I don't know, just be present with your kids, feel their pain, listen to them. Don't try to fix everything. And with girls, especially, I think our girls, they just need they've just needed that physical dad affection. So just make sure you love your kids. That's pretty bad.
I think that's awesome. Being present.
Yeah.
I think for girls, like, their dads are their first experience with men when they enter the world. And I do believe that how they view their dad is how they view their future, husband, spouse, etc.
That's what we see, right?
Yeah.
And so the other thing is, there's another thing I talk about sometimes just in therapy as I'm counseling somebody is, it's another Daisy story, but Daisy, we got to experiment on her. She was our first one, right?
Yeah, it is an experiment with your first kid.
Right. Poor thing. And so I remember she was like 10 or 11, and she's kind of in that phase between being a little kid and starting to, she wants to be taken seriously, and she's kind of getting into that adolescent phase, and she's right in that like crossing over phase. And I remember like heading up to some kind of craft fair, and she's maybe 5th grade, about to go into middle school, like right in that transition. She's going to this craft fair, and we're heading up to her school, and I'm physical with my kids. And so I'm like bumping her and tickling her, and she's, she's walking with me, and all of a sudden she gets real rigid, and I'm like messing with her, and pretty soon she's just like, it's weird. Like I'm going like, what's going on? Yeah. And she turns to me and she says, "Stop it. You're embarrassing me." Now I got some options. Don't you ever talk to me like that, or something else, like you're being disrespectful. Yeah. But I felt this is like a God moment. I don't know how you kind of get God dropping stuff into you. The Holy Spirit felt like was saying, if you don't let her have this boundary right now, if you don't let her be able to say no, even to her dad, then that's going to have a cost to it. And so just, I don't know. For me, it's just paying attention to those moments. It's not about me. And so I just backed off, and I had some feelings about it. Yeah. Your kids can hurt your feelings.
Yes, they can. Yes.
But I just had that moment where I'm like, I've just got to let her be able to say no to me. And I that was I don't know. I just it was just like, put an imprint in my mind. Like, even at that age, kids have to know that they can be like, don't do that, even to their dad. So, anyway.
No, that's so good. That's so good, because you're a safe person for her to set that boundary with. Right. And when you respected that boundary, that taught her in that moment, oh, I could do this again. Right. And then when it's really important.
If they don't learn that, or if they're told like, you can't do that, you can't, I can do whatever I want. I'm your dad. Yeah. As innocent as it was.
Detrimental in the future.
Very problematic.
Totally. Same with feelings. Like if they don't feel safe to feel, embarrassment in that moment. Yes. Same thing. What are you teaching them? Shutting that down. Yeah.
I just think like being attentive, emotionally attentive, I don't know. Too many parents, I think, feel like parenting is about them, but we got to just go like, what's good for my kids? And even I want better for my kids than I had it. But the reason I am the person I am today is because I had to suffer. It's because I had to struggle. I had to eke some things out. I just talked to a client this morning about it. It's like, I had to, there were times where I had to kind of like figure out, this sounds dramatic, but like, what am I going to eat today? But I'm telling you, like, those are the things that were helpful to me later on, is that I had to figure some stuff out myself. And I think parents don't let their kids suffer anymore.
Yeah.
Not cause it, but they're like, hey man, you got to figure this out yourself, Yeah. And so I think I know we're not talking about parenting necessarily, but like, we've got to let our kids learn how to suffer well. One of my favorite quotes, Carl Jung, he says, all neurosis is a replacement for legitimate suffering. All neurosis is a replacement for legitimate suffering. And a lot of addiction stuff I see, people who just can't suffer. Yeah. Yeah. They don't have any frustration tolerance. They don't have any ability to work through pain. And so they medicate. And so it's a little bit of a soapbox, it's just seeing parents who just, kids have got to learn how to work through problems. Yeah. We solve too many of their problems for them.
I absolutely agree. I agree 100% with what you're saying. We live in the microwave, McDonald's drive-through, generation. Yeah. At this point in history where everything is so fast. And then of course you add social media to it. Yeah. And it's just, everything is so fast. There is no, the waiting.
Yeah.
There's
You
no
have to
tolerance for
wait.
that.
You have to save.
Yeah.
I got kids, like we went to Liberty University for a college visit, and like kids think that their dorm rooms should look like our first houses did.
Exactly.
Right? I gotta have the big screen TV. They got the nicest cars, and they haven't paid for it, or they're going in debt for it. They're, just learning how to, save, wait for. I sound like I'm 50. I turned 50, so maybe I'm getting to be that old man.
Yeah.
Talking about like back in my day.
You've got the wisdom.
Yeah. So, but I do think that the best advice is for dads and girls: love your kids, but love does include boundaries, right?
Yes. Oh yeah, we could do a whole podcast on that. Love does include boundaries.
There's no such thing as tough love. There's only love.
Interesting.
So when you set boundaries, it's love, not tough love. It's the most loving thing you can do, I think. And too many, Cloud and Townsend in their book Boundaries, I love their line where too many times as parents or spouses, we're responsible and punished, while the people that we're enabling are irresponsible and rewarded.
Wow.
Right? And so it's like we got to turn that around where they feel the consequences of their behavior. So anyway, we got carried away.
That's great. I love talking about boundaries.
Yeah, boundaries to me are everything. Like every note I'm doing in therapy notes is like working out boundaries, because man, if people get that, it's a relationship changer.
Yeah.
Man. It's huge. I'm responsible for owning my crap. You're responsible for owning your stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. Boundaries. There's boundaries in addiction. The addiction world is huge. You kind of just started to talk about that. So let's expound on that, because you do work with some addictions.
A lot of addiction and recovery live. And you hear the word recovery, people are automatically thinking drugs and alcohol, but like recovery is a process. It defines a process, not an issue. And so we have found that the 12 steps, and for us it's the Christ Center 12 steps, works on anything that people are struggling with. So we do see a lot of codependency, relationship issues, depression and anxiety and anger, and you name it. It seems that the 12 steps seems to be a really good process. Well, it's a great process, but in Recovery Live, we talk about 3 Ps. We want to connect folks to their higher power. We want to connect folks to safe and supportive people. And we want to connect them to a process where they can feel like, if I come into this Recovery Live ministry on a Friday night at Temple City Church, or they're on recoverylive.com and they're getting into a group, that they feel like that immediately they're connected to somebody. They feel like there is a power greater than themselves, that they can feel some kind of purpose. They can feel a sense of like, I can let go. I can be loved, as only, in my opinion, a Heavenly Father can do that. And then also they can get connected to something that says, here's your next step, a process. And I think that's even missing sometimes in therapy. I've just seen a lot of therapists where they just are like, let's just talk and let's just talk and let's just talk. And every week, let's just talk. And it's the same thing. And I like to try and say, let's move. What's your next, in recovery, we say, what's your next right thing? What's your next thing? And the 12 steps gives people a next thing to do. And so, we see a lot of codependency. We see people come in. One of the most interesting things that happens is that a wife usually will drag her husband in because her husband's struggling with an addiction. And she'll say, I'm here for him.
Right.
And then next thing you know, a year later, she's the one who's getting all the healing. She said, I came for him, but I realized I'm the one who really needed, or also needed the help. And so codependency, in my opinion, that's probably my most biggest passion, is to help people who struggle with codependency, probably because I struggle with codependency.
Right.
Is to see people find healing from this thing that, I don't know, codependency. A lot of people will say like, it's just this issue where I just love people too much, or, I'm trying to help this person with an addiction and they just are so screwed up. And I think codependence, we have our own addiction, and it's people addiction.
Wow.
So I think it's an addiction in itself.
Yeah. How would you define codependency for someone who does not know that term?
So what does God and a codependent have in common?
I don't know. Is this a joke or this is an
They
analogy?
both have a plan for your life. Yeah. See, codependents are folks who are defined as sometimes people pleasers. They have approval addiction. They get their joy and happiness out of your joy and happiness. Your emotions are something I'm responsible for. I kind of define it as almost like people worship when I'm talking to churches. Yeah. It's kind of a form of idolatry. It's just this thing where like, I'm so tuned into you, I don't even know how I feel.
Right.
I think Codependent No More, when she defines codependency, it takes her about 6 chapters because there's just so much to
so many layers.
Yeah. But I think just a really simple way to define it is like, I need you to be okay so I can be okay. And if you're not okay, I'm not okay. And I'm just so tied into you that I can't ever really figure out who I am. And it's devastating for folks. I mean, at least somebody who's an addict, they get high and they feel good. But man, when you're a codependent, when you're feeding your addiction, you never feel good. You're just always on pins and needles, making sure everybody else is okay. Yeah. And what has been your experience with codependency? I know you've done some.
Well, I think codependents, what they lack is boundaries.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, what I'm hearing is they have no boundaries. Because there's boundaries with people, but I also think that you can have, I was talking with someone about this morning. Yeah. You can have boundaries around yourself as well. Like, I am not going to participate in X, Y, and Z anymore. Like, I don't have to attend that argument. I don't have to engage in that conversation about that topic that we've talked about till we're blue in the face and nothing's changing, you know? So you can put boundaries around your mouth, your emotions, your physical being. Boundaries don't always have to be in place for the other person. It can also be around yourself.
100%. I think that's the point. Boundaries are about ownership.
Yeah.
So it's always about yourself. It's always about your property. This is where my property ends. This is where yours begins. Right. So yeah, when you're dealing with a codependent, it was really Bill Wilson and Lois Wilson, his wife, are the folks who kind of started this idea of like Al-Anon. And I'm not sure that Lois coined the term for codependency, but it started down that line. And there's a story she tells in her own biography about a time when Bill Wilson, the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, he gets sober and he's having all kinds of his addict buddies over to his house to do these 12-step groups. And she's like having this guilt. She's so glad that her husband got sober. Like, it's the best thing ever. But she also has needs. She wants his attention. She wants his love. And pretty soon, this group that he's having becomes another addiction. At least that's how she sees it. So she's torn as a codependent is. She's torn where she's going like, I'm so glad he's sober. But man, it's just like when he was drinking.
Yeah.
So as a codependent, she's like having this cycle. I get angry because he's doing this behavior. Then I feel guilty because I'm angry because he's a good guy and he's doing the best that he can. And then she beats up herself and then it builds up and she can't share it because she doesn't want to, I don't want to put this on anybody else. Everybody else has other issues to deal with. I don't want to put this. But then she builds up and then she's angry. And so one night she tells a story about how Bill is getting ready to go down and talk to these guys. And he's, back then everybody wore a tie wherever they went, to have breakfast, they wore a tie. So he's getting his tie on and getting all dressed up. And she's screaming at him. And she's the sweet little lady. And she's screaming at him and she says, darn your, well, she doesn't say darn your meetings, Bill. And he just turns around and walks out the door and she picks up a high heeled shoe and chucks it at his head and just misses him. And she's like, I was insane. I was losing my mind. Yeah. So she went out on the front porch to cool off as he went into his meeting and just ignored her needs. And she looks out on the front porch and she's just breathing hard and freaking out. And she sees a line of cars out in front of her house where all the guys were parked. And then she looks a little closer and there are people in these cars, women. So the women had come with their husbands and were just waiting for their husbands out in the car. All the cars, there's like 15 cars, a woman in every car. So she goes on the first and knocks on the window. She says, you want to come in and have some coffee? And they just go car to car. And it was the first Al-Anon meeting, was after like the worst fight that she ever had. And they started talking about the fact that they're just as addicted to their husbands as their husbands were addicted to the alcohol.
I've never heard that story.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Lois Wilson she was an incredible lady.
Yeah.
She was an incredible lady. And so, yeah, this thing has kind of emerged out of addiction because it's just that enabling is so easy to see in addiction. But codependency happens in all kinds of relationships. And so it's something that I think it's just as toxic as any addiction.
Yeah.
Because you just lose your identity.
Right. You lose yourself.
Yeah. And then if you're a parent and you're trying to love your child, you can love them to death almost. You know, you watch kids just turn into monsters.
Right.
If you ever seen a spoiled kid in the grocery store, maybe it's yours, maybe it's mine, and they're, you know, screaming for that lollipop and you say, no, and finally you give it to them. I don't think we realize when you give them the lollipop, you're not just giving in, you're rewarding poor behavior. You're reinforcing terrible behavior.
Yeah.
So it's not just saying I caved, but you're teaching them to do what they're doing. And so as they continue to do it, you're like, why are they acting so terrible? It's because you taught them. You gave them a treat. It's like giving your dog a treat every time he pees on your rug.
Right.
Good boy.
Yeah.
And so we reinforce that behavior. It's going to cause that behavior to continue. And so anyway, obviously I like talking about this subject. I just think it's something we miss.
Well, and I think, you know, like the term boundaries, I think a lot of people don't know the definition or understand what codependency is.
Right.
And I think we're surrounded by people who are codependent and they don't even realize it.
Martyrs, people who are just out there suffering silently.
Yeah.
Because they're worried about your needs, not somebody else's needs. But that's just pride, sort of, you know. So our work in Recovery Live happens within churches.
Yeah.
And churches are full of codependence, man.
Right.
People who are like, Jesus said, put your own needs aside. And just, not quite.
Yeah.
Not quite. He says, love others as you what? Love yourself, right? You got to learn how to love yourself before you can help love other people.
Well, John, it says that, you know, those that are first shall be last.
Yes.
You know, that's what I hear a lot.
Yeah. There's two stories. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, let's go.
Two stories in the Bible that are vital in codependency. You didn't know this was going to be your codependency
I think it's great.
episode.
I know. I thought we were going to talk about recovery life, and we'll get to it. But
that's where I learned all this stuff or practice it. But two stories in the Bible that are vital to understanding codependency. The first one is the prodigal son. And people think of the prodigal father as almost codependent because he seems like he's just letting this kid do whatever he wants to do.
Right.
But if you just watch how Jesus puts this together. It's a rich man because he has a servant. It says later that the prodigal wants to eat like the servants do, right? So his dad has servants, so he's rich. And he's got I'm sure, a very nice fortune. And the kid says, I want my inheritance. Now, if somebody told their dad, I want your inheritance, he's basically saying, I wish you were dead.
Yeah.
It's a pretty awful thing to do. And the dad, like our Heavenly Father does, says, I'm going to give you free will. If that's what you want, go for it. So he takes that inheritance, and the Bible says he blows it on wild living.
Yeah.
Crack houses and prostitutes. And he's got a bunch of friends, I'm sure. Now I'm stretching here, but I imagine that the dad, if he's rich, he knows what's going on. He knows this kid's out there blowing all his money, and he knows that he's suffering and struggling. He stays right where he is. He stays right where he is. Now the kid gets to a place where he loses all his money, right? You know the story?
Yep.
Loses all his money. He's got nothing. So he ends up working at a pig farm, remember? And the Bible says, Jesus is telling this parable, and he says, this kid gets so impoverished and he's in such dire straits that he wishes he could eat the pig slop, but his boss won't even let him eat pig slop.
Yep.
And the whole story hinges on one sentence, one verse. And no one would give him anything, including the father. Nobody rescued him. Nobody bailed him out of jail. Nobody came in and saved the day. And that's when he had a moment of clarity. He said, you know what? At least my dad and his servants do better. I don't need to go back and be a son. I'm going to humble myself and just say, I'll be a servant. I'll be one of your servants. You see how when we put boundaries in place, it leads to humility.
Mm.
You got to hit bottom.
Yep.
And you watch this kid hit bottom, and that's when he has this moment of clarity. And we just don't, codependency, we just don't we're throwing mattresses down everywhere, right?
Yeah.
When kids are trying to hit bottom. And so that whole idea of saying, I'm going to allow my kid to, I'm going to watch my kid suffer. Oh,
how hard is that?
when I'm in therapy and I'm talking to parents and I'm like, well, he'll be homeless. Yeah. I don't want to kick him out. You're not, boundaries aren't kicking anybody out.
Mm-mm.
What you're doing is you're saying, if you want to stay here, here's what I'm asking you to do. It's your rent.
Yep.
Whatever it is. You got to get good grades. You got to, stay in school, or you got to pay, at least $100 for groceries, or you got to clean up around here. If you don't do that, that's fine. See, boundaries say people go, well, don't you tell them you have to do it? They don't have to do anything.
Right.
Boundaries say this, you don't have to do that. But if you don't, here's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
That's mine.
Yep.
You can't live here. This is your rent. So if you don't pay your rent, it's fine. You just can't live here. Mm-hmm. Right. I'd rather you live here. That'd be great. And so you never kick anybody out. You say it was your choice because of your behavior to not live here anymore. I didn't want to kick you out. That stinks. I hate that you're leaving.
Right.
And so I think that prodigal story shows how important it is to let people, husbands, wives, whoever, hit bottom so that they can humble themselves and say, man, I need some help. Help me. Humility is a huge part of change. The second story is Jesus is having a conversation with his disciples, and he says, I've got to go and I got to die on a cross. Now, if I told you, hey, I'm going to go lay out on the highway here and let a car hit me, you'd probably say what Peter did and said, no, I'm not going to let you do that, John.
Right.
So Peter's like, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm not going to let you go to the cross and die. And Jesus says, he lays down one of the hardest boundaries of all time. He says, get behind me, Satan. That's a boundary.
That's a boundary.
Get behind me, Satan. And when he says it, I think any of us would be like, that is harsh.
Yeah.
But what he says right after that, he says, because you don't have the things of God in mind, but the things of man. And the importance of that is Peter wanted to prevent suffering from happening, not so that Jesus could fulfill his purposes, but so that Peter would have relief from his own suffering of watching his friend die. You know what I mean? So it's like,
it was prideful. It was selfish.
It was totally selfish because I want to relieve my suffering.
Yeah. My discomfort.
By relieving yours. Mm-hmm. And that's what Peter got in trouble. And I think people read that and go like, what the heck? Yeah. That's a little harsh, but it is like, what if, let's ask the question, if you are a believer, if you're a Christian, what if Peter would have been successful?
Yeah. It would have screwed up the whole world.
There you go.
He would have screwed up everything.
Jesus is like, boy, that's a good point. I don't want to die on a cross. Thank you, Peter. Yeah. And he just blew it.
Yep.
Yeah. So preventing suffering is not the end goal. Sometimes when we prevent suffering, we're preventing people from finding their redemption.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So those two scriptures are a lot of times what I use to go like, hey, when you prevent somebody you love from suffering, oftentimes you're keeping them from the redemption that God is trying to bring into their lives. And as soon as you let that go, watch what happens. Yeah. Now, the risk is they could go out and really hurt themselves. Mm-hmm. But being able to go like, that's not mine anymore.
Yeah.
I'm like another Cloud & Townsend. I'm responsible for my children. I'm responsible for me. I'm responsible for minors. Anybody? Daisy, Lily, Violet, Rose, those are my kids.
Yeah.
They hit a mailbox when they're 16, 15. Actually, Daisy actually did this. Poor Daisy. I've talked about her 3 times.
Poor Daisy.
She hit a mailbox when she was 16.
Yeah.
Guess who the neighbors came to? Because it's my responsibility.
Yeah.
Daisy's 25. She hits a mailbox. They come to my house. I'm like, I don't know. She's 25. That's hers.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And so I'm responsible for myself and my children if they're under 7. But then I'm responsible to other folks I have a commitment to, but I'm not responsible for them. Mm-hmm. Responsible to and responsible for are very different things. Yeah. I'm responsible for the things that are me, and obviously people who can't take responsibility for themselves. I'm responsible to my adult children, but not for them. Anyway.
Yeah. Those are some great lessons.
Yeah, I just like talking about it.
You're dropping it.
Codependency is a really important subject. I just don't think we talk about it enough.
I don't think so
especially
either.
In the addiction world, because it's 50-50.
Yeah.
and I'm a systems theorist.
Yeah.
So you can't really understand addiction outside of the system that people are living in.
That's right.
Yeah.
Especially the family
The
system.
family system is everything. And what a shame. Can I just say this about therapy?
Yeah.
When I code for family therapy, you don't get paid.
Not
It's
for the number,
insane.
not for the amount of people in the room.
No, and it's just less. It's just like family therapy should be like number one. I think people should immediately be told, let's do a family therapy intake. Let's talk about the system, because like people don't operate outside of the system that they're living in.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why this codependency, like or roles with family, who's the clown, how does this fit? This family, this kid who's kind of the lost child, and this identified person, everybody's attention is here, and these kids are being ignored, and they're doing good things, right?
Right.
They're not being rewarded. This kid's getting rewarded, all this attention. So I had probably too much coffee, sir.
It's okay. It's so good. I think the listeners hopefully are just soaking it up, because again, we're talking about topics like boundaries. And I think I talk with people who are of Christian faith, who don't understand boundaries and think that it's not biblical, because to them, they hear the world's message of boundaries, which means, I'm not forgiving, or I'm putting this wall up, or I'm putting myself first, and that's selfish, and that's not what Jesus would do. And so I get pushback from people of Christian faith a lot on boundaries, because I don't think they really understand. So I love your analogy and your story of the prodigal son, and how the Bible does talk about boundaries. And that dad did put down a boundary.
He did.
And I hope more people who read the Bible and follow the Christian faith understand that I think God's okay with boundaries.
Oh, he loves it. Free will.
Right.
You do your thing. I'll do mine.
Right.
He says, what you sow, you'll reap.
Yeah.
I mean, there's consequences.
Yeah.
God is a God of order and consequences. And like, hey, man, if you sow this amount of talents, you'll get this. If you sow none, sorry for your luck, man.
Yeah.
And I'm frustrated because you don't take some accountability for the fact that I've given you this. This is yours, and you haven't done anything with it.
Right.
So God's all about that. I think he's all about making sure that we take ownership is such a huge concept to mental health and well-being is I'm going to take ownership. And so we see in addiction, a lot of blame shifting. We see in codependency, a lot of like, hey, this is my kid, he struggled with ADHD coming up, and kids want to take responsibility. They want to be in charge of some things, because kids don't have any power.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't have any control over where they were born, who they were born to, where they go to school,
where they live.
You want to give them some ownership pretty soon. I remember way early, I don't know if you remember, there was a parenting program really popular called Systematic Training in Effective Parenting, STEP. I don't know if you remember STEP.
Yeah.
But they talked about like early on in the agrarian societies when kids were part of like the survival of the family farm. Like people would have as many kids as they could because everybody had to contribute.
Yeah.
But then everybody felt like they were a part of the family. Like not just, hey, I'm a kid, my parents love me, but I don't know what my purpose is. They're like, man, if I don't show up and milk the cow, we're going to have problems.
Right.
And so when we've moved into a world that's very different from that, kids, I think, don't feel a whole lot of purpose. They don't feel a whole lot of they don't have a lot of power. So being able to go like, hey, I'm going to give you some responsibilities very early on and give you some pride over something. That's why I think pets are great. That's why even working very early, kids having jobs early is super important. I got lots of opinions about those things.
Yeah. But I mean, just thinking through that a minute, there's such an identity crisis among teens and youth these days. Yeah. And maybe that's part of it. Part of the reason they feel purposeless. And so they're trying to find out who they are and decide who they are.
Yeah. I think still sports. I mean, I think your kids did cheer and some
soccer.
Other things. Yeah. How important was that for them to be a part of a team?
1,000%, especially. Well, and I think too, like whether it's a part of a sports team or a band or art club or whatever it is, kids need to feel a sense of belonging desperately. And the kids that you see that fall wayward, they're the ones that didn't, back to the people part of Recovery Live, they didn't have a connection with a group of belonging in middle school or high school. And it's tragic. And I think they have tragic outcomes.
Yeah. And I think when you're a part of a team and you have to show up for your team.
Yeah.
You have to be there and play that part. I played football. My girls played volleyball. My daughter's part of the band. She's at the ECU band. Like you're a part of the band. You're not, all alone out there playing an instrument, but that instrument, if it doesn't show up, it's not going to be as good. It's going to be problematic. You're part of a team. And, even with like veterans, I see a lot of veterans at Recovery Alive, and we're starting a Recovery Alive veteran program where we're going to have some pretty cool things happening there. But one of the things that happens when veterans come back after being deployed is they struggle with purpose because they're over Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, wherever they're at. They're in some part of the Middle East, or they're on deployment, and they're part of like it's life and death. Yeah, they're saving lives. Right. They're bringing freedom into area. It's just, they're on mission. That's a good way to say it. They're on mission, and they come home and they're just pushing papers or whatever. They lose that sense of purpose. But the other thing they lose is that is what they call a esprit de corps, where it's like, I'm part of a band of brothers. Yeah. Or a band of sisters, whatever. But like you have this like a sense of like, if I don't show up for my fellow soldier, we're in trouble. It's life and death. And so I think we're made for that. Yeah. I think we're created for that. Yeah. And so I think our kids are missing it. I think adults are missing it. A sense of like community. I think with social media, I think COVID blew that up. Yeah. Just when people were isolated, it wasn't just community. It was a sense of purpose in community. I think that is why I love the church. That's why I love the church communities, because we're on mission. Yeah. Or should be. Yeah. And that's why Recovery Life thrives in churches. It is a church-based program. Yeah. And it's been too long since the church has not stepped up in areas of mental health and substance use. I think there's just been a lot of stigma. And so I'm excited about Recovery Alive being specifically a church on mission, the heart of a church being like, hey, there's this God who loves people and meets them right where they're at. And the church sometimes gets away from that a little bit. And I think Recovery Life can kind of bring churches back to focus on what's the reason church exists? What's our mission? Yeah.
So can you tell the listeners a little bit about how you founded Recovery Alive, how this came to be?
So I was a national director for Celebrate Recovery. I was over basically the east side of the country for a Christ-centered ministry called Celebrate Recovery, which was founded out in Saddleback Church in California by Rick Warren. If y'all remember Rick Warren, Time Magazine's America's pastor. He actually, it was crazy. He did like, he hosted a debate between, I don't know if you remember this, Barack Obama and John McCain. And it was very cordial. It was in a church, obviously, but it's just really neat. Rick was kind of a unique guy who John Baker and he partnered together to offer this 12-step program, and it exploded all over the country, partly because it's a proven method that works phenomenally, and it can be replicated very easily in churches. But also Rick Warren was a pretty charismatic dude. Yeah. And so he helped write a lot of the curriculum. I was involved for about 15, 20 years. And then when Celebrate Recovery hit COVID, they had some DNA that said, we don't believe in online ministry. They just thought it was going to be a little unsafe to do groups online. Sarah Coates, you are way ahead of the game. My gosh, I was so impressed with you. I remember being in those trainings and stuff for telehealth going, this is going to be terrible. Why are we doing this stuff? This sucks, And then you're like a prophetess. We were like all going like, thank God that we learned telehealth early, because then we could just jump into this stuff. And it was safe. It was just as effective. Yep. I almost hate to say it. It was just as effective. Yeah. I didn't like it as much, but it was just as effective. Totally. It stayed connected. In some ways, it was more effective because people were comfortable in their own space. Yes. It was really a beautiful thing. I don't think it worked great for schools and kids in school. I remember that was awful, but it works great in therapy. Yes. And so I was convinced, number one, our Friday night Celebrate Recovery at the time of 2019, we're running 500 people on a Friday night. And I'm like, we cannot shut down. I mean, there's churches shutting down, Celebrate Recovery shutting down. I said, we can't do that. And so that was probably the main issue that I had, and just pulled away from Celebrate Recovery and said, we're going to do online ministry. And I remember sitting in my garage, working out in my garage because there was no gyms open.
Right.
And I got in this gorilla bow. Like I can feel it. I remember I spent so much money on this. Do you remember how much like gym equipment was?
Yeah,
like
the Pelotons, remember?
To buy a dumbbell was like $1,000.
Yeah.
And it was this gorilla bow. And I was out in my garage and I'm like, man, is this the right thing to do? And this hit me. This name hit me, Recovery Alive. I just remember it just being dropped. And that's when I said, all right, we're going to do this thing, start Recovery Live. And I started writing my own curriculum. Celebrate Recovery had a great curriculum, but it was a little long. It took 9 to 12 months to work through the 12 steps through Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah.
The book that I wrote, the Recovery Live Handbook, shortened it up to about 3 months. Takes about 3 months to get through. Game changer, because people have a hard time committing to a 9-month to 12-month process. Again, no shade on Celebrate Recovery. It's an amazing ministry. But everything can be innovated. And so we just took it and scrunched it down to 3 months. And what we're hearing is, and thank you, you gave a nice review on it. What we're hearing is it's just as effective in a third of the time.
Yeah.
Helps us to produce leaders faster, helps people stay committed to the process. A lot of people drop out of groups when they're 9 to 12 months long. And so wrote the curriculum end of 2021. I mean, we're close to probably 15,000 books sold, which is amazing.
Wow.
We have a bunch of prisons and jails that are using it, that was a hard thing for the Celebrate Recovery curriculum because, it's a lot of transition in prison. So 12 months is a long time to have to go through. So when you can give a material that can take 12 weeks or less, if they double up, it can be 6 weeks. Anyway, it's been fabulous. We're back to our old COVID, post-COVID numbers are hitting 400 to 500 on a Friday night. We have a Wednesday lunch meeting in Selma. That's where we're getting 50, 60 people. There's ministries popping up all over North Carolina and then all over the country.
Yeah.
And then we're also starting. So there's probably 70 to 80 groups around the country and they come to me.
That's awesome.
Asking, hey, can we get this thing started? I've never solicited this. Did write something called the Recovery Life Guidebook to help people start these recovery ministries inside of their churches. And so when you start a Recovery Live ministry inside of your church, it's a para-church ministry. In other words, it's under the umbrella of your church. You have a curriculum that you're working people through, but if you run the full program on a Friday night for us, Thursday night, any night of the week, just have some music, have a teaching or a testimony, and then you break up into these small groups of gender specific. We don't do issue specific because if we're going to give the message that all struggles are about the same thing, there's lots of different struggles, but one solution, then we don't like to break up into other groups. What we found is that there's shame sometimes associated with different issues that people have. So, I mean, people who are struggling with like pornography, and we'd have a group for that. We'd have to have it around the side of the building or something like that because they're just so ashamed. So it's just like, let's put them all together and say, everybody's struggling with something. Let's just get together and talk about the fact that we all have different problems, but there's a common solution. So we have these men's groups and these women's groups. And we're seeing some pretty incredible things. And then throughout the week, we have these process groups going on. If you've ever been to a church where they have the main church service and then they have small groups happening throughout the week, that's kind of how this works. We have these process groups going on throughout the week. And man, if you read the reviews of what's happening with the Recovery Live Handbook on Amazon, that's a good place to go. If I want to go to if I want to check out a restaurant, I just went to that coffee place.
Oh yeah.
And I want to make sure it's going to be okay. I don't go to their website.
No.
I go read the reviews. I want to find the reviews, show me like, I don't know what, Yelp. Yeah. And I want to see, what do people say about this place? And so if you're interested in Recovery Live and want to go check out how this thing can be helpful, go on Amazon, read those reviews from we've never solicited a customer. So I don't know. It's crazy. I never thought I didn't plan to write this curriculum, and it's been crazy.
I've watched
good.
it. I've watched
Yeah.
it just explode.
Yeah.
And then what about the houses?
Yes. So
Tell me about those.
Yeah. You need to have Tisha Temple on
I
here.
was going to ask you about that.
Mama.
Yeah.
She is amazing. So she's a former prostitute on the streets, heroin, just
Wow.
walking around without any shoes, socks on in Henderson, North Carolina. That's her old stomp. Henderson. She was walking around Henderson, just blowing that town up about as dark a place that a person could be. If you hear her testimony, it's just remarkable. She had warrants out for arrest, and a police officer, she says this police officer saw her, went into the crack house, a drug house.
Wow.
Pulled her out, said, I'm not going to handcuff you because this is in front of your people. You know, I don't want to embarrass you. And just helped her walk through a process of, she was incarcerated, but walked through, connect her to treatment. It's a remarkable story, but she got a recovery, I think it was a life recovery Bible in prison, connected to the 12 steps, got sober, started working for, I think, the Alcohol and Drug Council of North Carolina, found our program, Recovery Live, started attending with her husband. You got to have him on too, Casey Temple. He's a suicide survivor, put a shotgun under his chin and pulled the trigger, survived, obviously. The two of them started coming, they got married, started coming to church, started coming to our recovery program. As Recovery Alive started to grow, I was like, man, I need some help.
Right.
So they came on, started helping me kind of volunteer basis, but then I brought them on as staff as we established Recovery Live Incorporated. And Tisha's dream was to start, she wanted to start a recovery home. She stayed in an Oxford house.
Yeah.
And so she was very involved in the Oxford House movement, and she said, "I want to start a recovery home." And I said, "I want your vision to be bigger than that." I said, "I want you to start a Recovery Alive home model." We started the first one, and I said, "But I don't want you to be over. I want you to find somebody to be over this one.
Right.
Let's start a bunch of them."
Yeah.
And so we have 3 Recovery Live homes in Johnston County. A lady by the name of Tanya was incarcerated 20 months ago, incarcerated. Same story, got a Bible, got connected to Recovery Live, got connected to the Recovery Live home, got into one of the homes, started getting sober, life change, came out of the home, transitioned out of the home. And now she's over the Recovery Live homes in Johnston County. Tish is over the Recovery Live homes around the country because we just opened our first one in Alabama.
Really?
Recovery Live home in Alabama. We've got a Recovery Live home that's about to launch in West Virginia. My sisters wrote a book called Restoring Victoria. It's a kid's book about a home that's devastated and destroyed and a mess, that a carpenter comes in and renovates. And it's a beautiful story of restoration. It's called Restoring Victoria, how people came into the house and used it and abused it and partied, and just, it used to be this beautiful Victorian home, and now it's broke. Well, this amazing lady who runs a Recovery Live in Salem, West Virginia, found a Victorian home. They're restoring it, and they're calling it Restoring Victoria. It is just
that's beautiful.
the most beautiful thing. Yeah. And so that'll be our 5th Recovery Live home. I think we're going to probably start one Harnett County.
Yeah.
I think we just got some funding to be able to start one down there. So we're just praying that every place every church that has a Recovery Alive ministry would have a Recovery Life home.
Yeah.
Because we talked about IOP. We'd love to have levels of care within the church.
It's amazing.
That people could step down.
Yep.
From rehab, prison, they can come right into a home, immediately be connected to a church community that loves them, connected to a recovery process, connected to safe and supportive people, connected to power greater than themselves. It's
beautiful.
It's awesome. We're pumped about it. And I think the church could be the urgent care. Like, I have a waiting list, and are you seeing folks? You see a few folks.
A few.
My waiting list, like I had a lady told me that she was on my waiting list for like 14 months.
We've told them John doesn't have a waiting list anymore.
Yeah. So but I think that's true in this space. And the people are really having a hard time finding psychiatrists.
Yes.
Really having a hard time getting into good therapists.
Yep.
What if the church was like, in the meantime, while you're doing that, come in here and just start working. And what happens is when I refer people to Recovery Live, a lot of times they get off my waiting list because I think we got it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to put us out of business. I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, I think we'll be fine. There's plenty of people not going to church.
The church, it's just time for the church to step up and
well, the church has been so, in my experience, so hands off of mental health. And, this is my beef with Christians. And I can say this.
Yeah. Because you're a Christian.
Because I'm a Christian. Like, stop telling people that it's just Jesus. Yeah, no. Just give it to Jesus and everything is better. Well, if you give your diabetes to Jesus, yes, I do believe he can heal it if he chooses to, but he don't always choose to do that. Yeah. And so just give your diabetes to Jesus and don't take any insulin. Well, you're going to die. Yeah. So 100%. Just give your depression and suicidal ideation to God and he'll take care of it. Yeah. He will take care of you in the middle of it. Yeah. But it doesn't mean he's going to erase that. And you need professional help. Yeah. So don't get me on that soapbox, John.
I love it. No, we're having Dr. Carl Benzio come out in a few, I think it's about 3-4 weeks. He's American Association of Christian Counselors psychiatrist for that whole AACC. Yeah. And he's going to be sharing on medication and Christianity. And he does, really? If you ever just Google Dr. Carl Benzio, he does the best job of anybody I've ever heard talking about the importance of this is an organ, right? The brain is an organ, just like anything else. So if a Christian's comfortable taking Tylenol, right, because you got a headache or whatever, it makes sense to take care of the organs of your body and know that they can go kind of wrong at times as exactly. Well. So I love that. And I think what I am seeing in the church is kind of a deer in the headlights because people are coming to the church. The AACC talks about the first person. Statistically, they see the first person that folks who are struggling with mental health issues go to for help besides family. Yeah. It's clergy people. Yeah. It's to their pastor. And the pastor's like, I don't know. Because pastors don't, rightly so, they don't have training in mental health. Yeah. And so I love what the AACC is doing is they're training coaches. They're doing, and they got this mental health coach program going on. They got Recovery Live coaching. They just took on it's a pretty cool thing. They have Recovery Live coaches program, 24 hours of training to become a Recovery Live coach. But they're just trying to train lay people to be prepared to receive folks who are struggling with mental health issues. Sarah, I was doing a training. I had somebody come up to me. I was doing a training on starting a Recovery Live ministry to pastors. And a pastor came up to me and says, John, I don't know that I want to start a program because I don't want to have addicts in my church. And I said, they're already there, dude. They're just not being honest, which is way more dangerous, more problematic, right? For sure. And so it's like, we have to realize that being a Christian means being equipped and prepared to receive people who are struck. Just like back in the day, I think it's our leprosy today. It's an opportunity to show who Jesus Christ is to the world. And so I'm watching churches start to engage this. And all of a sudden there's just I don't know, if I don't have training on how to change my oil and somebody says, change your oil, I'm going to get really freaked out about it. I can maybe figure it out. But if you have training on it and somebody says, you're ready, you're confident, come on, let's do this. Yeah. And that's what we want to be able to give to people as a tool to say, hey, pastor, what if you had a Recovery Live program in your church? If you do, somebody comes to your church and is struggling with anything, schizophrenia, anger, depression, anxiety, addiction to anything, and they come to your church and they're struggling, instead of going I don't know, there's a place down the road, maybe that'll help you. We can maybe give you some groceries. Yeah. He said, we are so glad you're here. We have the exact thing, no waiting list this Friday, Wednesday, you can get connected. And by the way, we have a Recovery Live coach that you can connect to immediately, or a mental health coach you can connect to immediately. Every service at Temple City Church in Selma, we have a red cover over one of the chairs in our sanctuary. That red cover means there's somebody seated on that chair who can respond to a physical issue. If somebody has a heart attack, if somebody goes into diabetic shock or whatever, they're there to take care of somebody with a physical issue. A lot of churches have it. Yeah. We also, right across from them, have a green chair with somebody who has training in mental health. So if somebody has a mental health emergency, there's a green chair there as well. And that green chair is just as important as that red chair. And that's what churches have to be prepared for. Is we're ready for you. We believe people sometimes have a medical emergency in our church. better believe somebody's going to have a mental health emergency here in our church, and let's be ready for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure people would be asking if somebody's having a serious crisis or a serious mental health struggle or illness, then your coaches are equipped to be able to help refer them to appropriate professionals.
And not just refer.
Yeah.
But to have an updated referral list.
Yeah.
Relationships with referral agencies.
Right.
So that's a huge part of becoming a mental health coach, is like, we're going to engage in relationship. We're not therapists, or the mental health coaches aren't therapists. Engage in that relationship, have a conversation with them about their needs, and then refer. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's in the meantime, hey, we got this recovery program.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Right.
It's helpful. Yeah.
Right.
So coaches, not therapists.
Yeah. For sure.
Prepared, ready. We're expecting it. And you're okay. You're okay. You're in the right place. Church is the right place for you to have a mental health.
Come as you are.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. That's awesome. Talk about a mission.
Yeah.
You're on it.
I love it, man. I think, like, I don't know how you got started in all of this. You know, at first I thought maybe I was called into becoming a pastor.
Yeah.
But I fought it because I just didn't feel like I wasn't fighting. It just didn't feel right.
Yep.
And I was talking to somebody yesterday about, they were kind of juggling whether or not they should go get the money or they should do what they love. And what they loved was not going to pay what this other thing was.
Right.
And I said, I'm just here to tell you, like, when you do what you love to do, it's just, I don't know how to convince you of that, but it's just nothing like showing up to work and just going like, I made a difference today. Like, and I just feel connected to my purpose. I mean, it's hard and it's a struggle, but it's, do what you love to do. I know you're doing what you love to do. You're good at what you're doing. This is amazing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I know you love, isn't it awesome to be able to show up and just do it? And it's work. You worked hard to get where you're at.
Oh yeah. Heck yeah.
And people go, oh, it must be nice. You don't know how hard.
You don't know the struggles. Yeah, right. You don't know what the past 25 years have been like. Right. But I do think that I feel super privileged to know that I'm walking in my purpose. Right. A lot of people are still trying to find their purpose. And I hope that they do, because there is a good sense of freedom when you're like, I am doing what I know God put me on this planet to do. Yeah. And you know what? Yes, I believe, do what you love. Your passions are your purpose. And I mean, money's nice, of course. You know, you got to feed yourself and feed your kids and keep the lights on. Right. But it's not everything, and you can't take it with you. Right. But I do think when you're walking in your purpose, God willing, He will give you everything you need. Yeah. Seek first the kingdom of God. And all of these things will be added unto you.
I read that somewhere.
Yeah. That's and exactly I believe that with my whole heart.
It's 100% true. It's, I like the concept of the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. I want all those things. I want to have those qualities. The Bible says that we can't manufacture that. I can't make that happen. I could only make the conditions right for those things to be produced in my life. Yeah. And so I think one of the ways that you produce good things in your life, it just happens, it comes out, which I think is finances too. Like, I think you're going to make money if you're doing what you love to do. Right. You know, if you're like, because man, the grind, oh my gosh. Yeah. But the grind is different when you're like, I know why I'm here today. That's right. I woke up at 4:30 this morning. I woke up this morning at 4:30. Yeah. Because I'm excited about my life. I want to get up. I want to get to it. I want to go get it. Yeah. You know, people say, wow, that's early to get up in the morning. You know, I'm just telling you, I can't wait to get out of bed and get going and get doing what I'm doing.
Why waste time sleeping?
Yeah, man. For real. I wish I didn't have to. That's part of mental health too, I guess, is getting enough sleep.
You got to get good quality sleep. But I'm very appreciative. So for
sorry
everything.
If we got off a little topic.
It's good though. This is great. How can people find out more about Recovery Life? Yeah. Throw us out some websites and links and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's real easy. recoverylive.com. You just go to recoverylive.com. You can watch some videos of what we do church-wide, what we do nationwide, what we do internationally. We're seeing churches around the world. We got a church in Africa engaged. I'm in process groups with folks in Germany. I'm in had a conversation with a guy out in Hawaii this week. So We're all over the place. We're all over the world. And so if you want to get involved you're interested in get involved in like starting a ministry in your church.
Yeah.
John at recoverylive.com. You can email me or go on the website, just do an interest form. I think one of the most helpful things to do is to get the book.
Yeah.
The Recovery Live handbook. And you say, now you're selling your product. But I'm just telling you, you get a hold of the handbook and you work it. I have not had anybody get into that book and not have a significant life change if they go through it with one safe and supportive person. It's not a book. I mean, you can just sit and read it.
Yeah.
I encourage you, just find one other person to work through that handbook with, and you will have life change. And you say, I'm doing okay. I don't really have any issues. There's a freedom that you don't even know exists that's available to you when you work through this 12-step process. I promise you. We say we'll give you a misery back guarantee. If you don't get anything out of it, you can have your misery back. I promise you, it will change your life if you go through this process. And so get a hold of the book. You can get it on Amazon, Recovery Live Handbook. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for walking out your purpose.
I love, man. There's nothing like it. I'm very grateful.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for coming. And thanks for listening today. If you like what you've heard, give us a 5-star review, like, subscribe, follow, do all those good things. And keep on tuning in to the Turn Your Life Around podcast. Thanks again. Hi, everyone. I appreciate you taking time to listen. These days we live in feel stressful, challenging, and maybe even chaotic. I'm really passionate about putting out positive content that will encourage and inspire others. I ask that you like, follow, subscribe, and even give us a 5-star review. Most of all, share this with your friends and family so together we can help people turn their lives around.